Oh, wow, there you are. Hi, my darling.
We have connected.
We have. That's so cool. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I didn't really want to tell you before, but really the main reason we wanted to get you on here this evening is to say a massive thank you and to toot your trumpet, because what you've done and what you're doing for menopausal midlife women everywhere is absolutely phenomenal. And we are, thanks to you and Trish and your podcast, Postcards from Midlife, we no longer feel that we have to skulk in the shadows and there are so many no-go taboo subjects, because you've talked about it all and you continue to talk about it all. And it's so inspiring and so comforting. And I think it's true to say that we no longer feel alone.
That phrase is the phrase that prompted Trish and I to set the podcast up 5 years ago. We just said we just don't want women to feel alone, because everyone thinks they're going through all these things on their own, and that's not fair.
It's not fair, exactly. And you talk about all the things that you know we all thought about and wanted to talk about, but couldn't. And you've given midlife women a voice, which is incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. And I wanted to just read this quote from your book, because I really love it. I love your book. This is Lorraine's book, really, really good. And it's your second book, isn't it?
Yes, my first book was Mum, What's Wrong With You, which was about parenting teenage girls, because that's what teenage girls say to you all the time. Oh my God, Mum, what's wrong with you? And then I realised that you're often parenting teenagers at the same time as going through perimenopause, and we're all saying, what's wrong? Well, actually, what is wrong with me?
Yeah. And now we know.
Yes,
and we're not all bonkers. Well, it's completely normal to feel bonkers and sweaty and sleepless and everything else.
Indeed it is. Yeah.
I love this bit, Lorraine. We're rooted in each other's stories. There's an inturning of us. It feels sturdy. It steadies me. And I really do need this common thread of experience in the moment. You will too. So look out for it. Be open to new women. Be curious and welcoming. I think that's just so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted that sense of the thing that pulled me through and that pulled Trish through, and I think any woman going through all of that, the thing that pulls you through is other women. It's always other women. That's the big thing for me. I mean, I started swimming outside because that suited me, but it wasn't really so much the swimming, it was the other women I met. It was that constant sort of pull it all the time. There's women pulling you through, saying you're not alone, I can help you. And I don't think sometimes we don't stay open to it, because midlife is a very busy, transitional, hectic space, and we all think we're going through it alone. And I think particularly, so I'm 56, so I'm Gen X, so Gen X and probably older millennials, we're not keen on showing vulnerability, and I think it really is the time to show vulnerability and ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that really has really blown me away by the HBD community. But everybody is cheering everybody else on. And again, there are very few subjects that are off limits, and everyone wants everybody else to succeed. And the sharing and the generosity and the love here is second to none. It's really incredible. Really.
Yeah, no, you've set up this amazing supportive community as well. Women trying to do something, change something. It's a bit tough at the beginning, and but you're going to get through it because other women told you they have. That's the key, isn't it?
Exactly. And I don't know if you've seen, but there are some fantastic Inspo Fridays, sort of before and afters, not just for weight loss, but for NSV's non-scale victories, about energy and better sleep and generally getting more joy out of life, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? So
I do think we sometimes think that, if we want to feel better, lose weight, sleep better, we've got to do something major. And I think when you came on the show, you said this actually as well, and other experts have said this, it's not about taking stuff out of your life or depriving yourself or doing something. It's big about small steps and adding things in that are healthier for you. And you can start with a glass of water in the morning, because then you will feel better, and then you'll have another one the next day because you did feel better after a glass of water, and you'll feel better, and then you'll think, well, then maybe I won't do this today. Maybe I won't do my high intensity exercise. Maybe I won't, you know, eat this or, you know, drink every night of the week. Maybe I won't do these things because I felt better because that one glass of water has got me in there. It's all about that small things in and making sure the changes happen incrementally and slowly and at the pace that suits you. And I think sometimes we envisage doing great big things and it's just too much because we're too tired.
We're too tired, exactly. I love that, Lorraine. Thank you. Yeah, there's so much deprivation and joylessness, and actually it's very nice, as you say, just starting the day with a glass of water is such a positive thing to do for ourselves, and also the time when we most need it, you know, because our body's been detoxing and chucking out all sorts of
and our brains need it. Our brains really need hydrating first thing in the morning. It's quite, every single expert has said that to us. And when women say to me, I'm in this place, it's terrible, I don't know how to move, what's your advice? They just start with a big glass of water in the morning and then start to work out other small things that will make you feel better or are kind of daily wins. I mean, there is some hard work to do sometimes, I think, because, you know, if you want to make a big difference in things, then you've got to apply yourself, but start gradually.
Start gradually. Very wise words. And thank you for joining us today as well, because I know that one of your children is heading back to university. So thank you for that, because that's precious.
You know, they come in and go out without telling you all the times of it, and she sort of, otherwise I'd have been later. She has to go, so I want to say goodbye to her.
Yeah, it's so tough though, isn't it? I mean, your book made me weep, you know, about looking at the hook in the hall where her coat used to be, and you know, there's those little things. And I remember when my son was heading off to South America for his gap year, and I was crying the whole time and talking to women with buggies and saying, treasure every moment, you think this will go on forever, but suddenly it's all over. And they were all thinking, oh my goodness, you know, she's really lost it. And he saw my plight and he bought some champagne and a couple of glasses, and he said, we'll drink this together, Ma, when I get back. Yeah, no,
I have this piece of the mug piece of advice that seemed to resonate really well with women is I brought the two of my girls have left and I've got a boy and a girl left at home, but for the first two I bought them a mug which I kept here. So before they went, we would have tea out of the mug in the lead up to them going, and it would be that thing. Every time I'd see it, I'd kind of remember them. And it was all, and now these mugs are in the cupboard. So when they're gone, I have this sense that they're still here because they're mugs, you know, it's just a small thing that means they're definitely coming back because they've got their mug. They'll come back, and tea is such a lovely ritual. You know, these tiny little rituals that you can bring back and that, you know, don't really change no matter how old they are, because there are, you know, other rituals which really do change when they come back that first time after being away. It's really disruptive because they come back different people. They've left home for the first time, they do things in a different way, but little things like a cup of tea or you know, so some telly program you watch together or a card game you all play as a family, those things can sort of stay, I think, and that eases it a bit. But I put it in the book because I had absolutely no idea how horrific the empty nest thing it's a real living loss. It's grief, and
it's grief, isn't it?
Grief for that bit of your life, grief that you can't, you know, tomorrow's not a day you can put anything right because they've gone, and their actual physical emptiness is a really sort of I think I just didn't think it would hit me that hard, and you know, and I had 3 left at home and it really did.
No, it's so tough, isn't it? There is so much about loss, isn't there? And you know, you write about all of it so beautifully in your book. You know, loss of ourselves, loss of dear friends, you know, to death far too early, loss of our children, loss of our identity. But it's not. I mean, I just wept and wept when I read that. Thank you. But I also want to say it's not all about sadness and sorrow. I love what you wrote about your husband and his late onset humming. That's bloody brilliant.
There's some sort of common themes for, you know, women like me and Trish, and we've been married to these men quite a long time. They're midlife men as well. They're around the same age, and you get into a routine. And I thought, where's this humming come? You know, humming all the time, so annoying. And then I asked we have a private Facebook group attached to the podcast, and I said, does anyone else's husband just started these funny habits? midlife, and they are quite annoying. And I'd literally got 70, 80 women saying, oh, I can't stand the finger drumming. I can't bear how he won't wear his headphones when he's listening to something on his thing. And there was a man who used to slice the cheese in the fridge, and lots of things that were just, after 30 odd years or 20 odd years, were just really annoying.
Yeah.
And I thought, how funny we all get these little niggly, I mean, I guess you would, living with people that long a time, but also I think maybe some men get quite set in their ways and they're sorted by it, and this is how they want to do things in midlife. And you know, they can hum if they want now, and it doesn't matter how annoying it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I also love what you said. I think, is it fair to say this is your mantra: patience, positivity, and gratitude?
Yes, I say gratitude because there is so much science around that. There is a lot of neurological learning around how good gratitude is for your well-being and for your keeping your brain healthy, and just making sure that you keep the inflammation levels in your body down. It's just I you know, it could be a bit of a hippie sort of well-being thing, but gratitude really, really powerful, especially if you write it down first thing in the morning. So much science and so many studies around that. And then just, you know, Trish and I always say, let's not moan about it. Let's just sort of find out what it is and then find out how to make it better, but not moan about it, because that's just going to bring everybody down. So we try to stay generally as positive as we can when we're doing anything on the podcast or whoever we're interviewing. And, you know, I think making women aware of what is happening, information is power, and that makes you feel better. But I think there is a fear that all women will say, oh my God, this is coming at me, I'm absolutely terrified. And you know, a couple of people said, oh, the first 2 chapters are terrifying, because I went through a very terrible perimenopause.
Yeah.
Only because I didn't know what was happening. If I'd known, I wouldn't have had to go through that for 2 years. I would have had it sorted out within 6 weeks, but I didn't know. And I think now that we know, that's what gives women the power, knowing that there are up to 40 symptoms of perimenopause. It starts sort of 10 years before the menopause, which is roughly around the age of 51, which is a retrospective diagnosis of your, you know, a year after your last period. You don't know those hormone fluctuations, how they're going to affect everyone. They affect all women very, very differently. I mean, I didn't have hot flushes, but you know, so it was really knowing it's good for you, and then you don't need to moan about it. You can say, well, I'm getting it sorted. So that's the thing, isn't it? Having the power to sort it.
Exactly. Because I think one of the things that didn't happen to you was, I don't think you put weight on, did you, around perimenopause?
No, well, latterly in my 50s, but not during my perimenopause. But I think that was because I was, you know, on the verge of a breakdown. I was having absolutely no sleep, and I was having what they call night terrors, where they are kind of horrific. I can only describe them as nightmares, but you actually feel as if it's happening to you. So you would feel as if someone was pulling you out of your bed and trying to attack you, and it feels like you're awake. It's really quite unpleasant, and it's a breakdown of how your brain's working. And I think, and once that insomnia had set in, everything else was just kind of collapsing around me. So I was losing weight because I was just in such an awful place because of the hormonal fluctuations. You know, within a week of going on HRT, I was better. So, but it is the most common thing we get asked, I would say, because the way fat is stored is very different as you head into midlife. We had Tim Spector on the podcast talking about the science that's just started. You know, no one's researched it.
Amazing. Incredible.
Who cares about women? You know, no one's done any research into why. And it's not, oh, women are putting on weight, how vain of them to be worried about putting on weight at this stage. It's very, very bad for your health in midlife. To carry fat and visceral fat in the wrong places. It's just not good for you. And that's what the women are worried about on our Facebook group. Is this going to affect my future health? Am I going to be iller as I get older because I put on this weight? And we all know heart disease is the biggest killer of women, despite all the research into heart disease being done into men. And I know that from personal experience. So, you know, the weight thing is very, very important, I think, to know about it and to get control of it so that you're healthier.
Exactly, and to get that inflammation down, because that's that's behind, like the World Health Organization tells us that 74% of annual deaths worldwide are preventable because they're due to lifestyle diseases. and we should all, you know, eat a better diet and do more exercise, which is very unfair because nobody really knows what that means.
No.
But you know,
it's very non-specific to women as well. I mean, that's one of the things, you know, we've been looking, Trish and I've been looking at doing something around functional medicine, actually, because there is, you know, you put on weight, you go to your GP, particularly if it's an excessive amount, and you say, and then you're treated for something being wrong with you. But actually the bigger lifestyle changes and all the other things that might lead to the inflammation increasing, and particularly stress and loneliness. Loneliness is the #1 killer of everyone.
Yeah.
I did a lot of research into longevity, and that's, you know, social isolation is deadly for people.
Yeah.
So, but your normal medicine doesn't go into that. It just treats the kind of, you know, where you are. So that, you know, creating a community around doing something that's good for you is actually going to much reduce inflammation, because it's slightly removing stress, and it is better to do things with people than, you know, that's what we always felt with the podcast. This is a community really that's going to share and pass information on, and just keeping people connected is really good for their health.
Really good for their health. Well, there was a Swedish researcher, I can't remember her name, but she said, loneliness is much more dangerous than smoking or anything else you can think of. Yes.
Yeah, well, we all know, you know, I think women can feel quite lonely even when they're surrounded by people. Loneliness and just particularly social isolation, it really does drag you down, and it's so bad for your mental health. And once your brain stops working properly, you're at risk of quite a lot of other things as well, I think. So keeping people connected is, I think that would always be my advice for well-being and longevity, is just stay as connected to other people. Just those kind of little phone calls, join clubs, go to groups, ask for help. Don't try and do it on your own. You know, that kind of, you know, all these Facebook groups are actually really good for women, the midlife Facebook groups, I think.
Yeah, no, really good, really helpful. And as you say, you know, we no longer, we don't have to have those feelings of being alone anymore, because, you know, there are so many groups out there, including HBD, of course. And Lorraine, tell about, you had the most awful, terrifying time, and then you came across Dr. Louise Newsom. And
yes, so I was writing a piece about I wanted to write a piece about the menopause and perimenopause, because I'd done some research and Dr. Newsom's name kept coming up, as there was very significantly this large clinic that was only helping women with menopause. That was a specialised thing, and doing tons of research into menopause across the world and menopause in different cultures, and then putting all this information out there. And I thought, well, that's a great piece, because I haven't heard it. Obviously, I was at the Sunday Times at the time. No one wanted that piece. No one was interested in that. Nobody wanted that. So I said, okay, right, well, I'll try and get it in another one. I was editing Style magazine, so we did a spa special every year. So I said, okay, right, well, I'm going to do a midlife spa. I'm going to get this piece in as a midlife spa. So I rang Louise, and she said, obviously, you know, this is a private clinic, because I wanted to work in the NHS, but there just wasn't a clinic available for me, and nobody wanted me to specialise. So she'd set up a private clinic. I went up to see her, paid for my treatment. But what was connected to Louise was all the lifestyle stuff. She said, you can't really do this until you look at your health and how you're sleeping, and maybe look at yoga, meditation, CBT, all these things around it. So that's how I got it in the magazine. But what she told me just blew my mind, and I just kept saying, what, you mean there was a survey 21 years ago on a type of HRT that isn't used anymore, and was on women over 65, and it was a self-reported survey, and now all menopause treatment is based on this terrible, misguided survey full of information about women that isn't relevant anymore? And she was, yes, that's why we are where we are. So it was kind of, I just thought, God, well, I have to, you know, I'm going to have to just keep following this up. And there are many women now working, many great GPs, both private and in the NHS, focused on and trained to deal with menopause, and they just weren't. But I'm talking about just 5 years ago, and they just weren't. And then
it's incredible, isn't it?
When Davina made Kate, my friend Kate Muir, who was a journalist as well, was producing the Channel 4 documentary, and she said, do you think Davina would present it? I said, absolutely, I think she would. I think she's your right person. And I'd known Davina through other things I've done. And it was that documentary, I think, that began to spark off the bigger conversation. And now these conversations are happening all around the world. And I do think that comes from Louise's work. I really think she spearheaded and pioneered all the information. You've got to remember, a lot of her stuff is out there for free. The Balance app is totally free. All the information is on it. She pays for a phenomenal amount of research. But you can imagine that when one doctor is going against quite a large proportion of the medical profession and the patriarchal medical profession, then she's going to become a controversial figure. We've seen that in history.
Yeah, very, very brave. Schopenhauer, I can't remember the quote exactly, but it was about, first they dismiss you as a lunatic, and then, well, finally it ends up that whatever it was that somebody like Louise was saying, well, of course, it's self-evidently true, But every truth goes through those three stages. I'm very sorry, I can't remember the middle one. But no, really, really interesting. And you were cheered by the idea that Panorama that they were doing a documentary about menopause, midlife, and horrified to see it and what they came up with. It was the same old stuff. Unbelievable.
Well, it's just, it was a 32-minute documentary. It presented one side. I didn't feel it was particularly well researched. I didn't think it was medically sound. I felt it was a shame to hear the British Menopause Society, which is a charity, not a governing body, and does charge quite heavily for its courses on menopause for GPs. It was just quite sad to hear them saying there's not enough research and there's not, well, you're part of this. There should be more. Spearhead it then. I just think that what it did, which was a real shame, was it was misguided in that it didn't offer enough information for women to know the true picture, and it frightened, and we know that from the podcast, women were terrified on the Facebook group about, what do I do? Am I having too much? It was about the essence was the prescription of HRT and possible risks of overprescribing. I'm not a medic. I don't know those possible risks, but I do know that I'm on the highest level of HRT. And I have done a lot of research, so I wouldn't be on that if I didn't believe it. But it's just this sense that no proper research really was applied, and that the other half of the story wasn't told. And also this kind of sense, which I know as a journalist, negative news headlines sell more papers than positive and get more clicks and get more views. So of course that's always going to be how people come in at these things, and it felt a real shame and a real missed opportunity. And actually, the NHS has just put the nice guidelines out again to reiterate that HRT is the first line of prescription for women going through the perimenopause and the menopause, and that you should ask for that, and it should be offered to you ahead of antidepressants, etc., etc.
That's you. That is definitely you. Because it's still antidepressants, isn't it, mostly, that women get?
Well, I think there was a survey saying a third or 2/3 of all women had been mistakenly offered antidepressants before HRT, because you present with anxiety generally, you present with mental health problems. And antidepressants may be helpful for some women, and you can take them alongside HRT, but they're not going to make any difference to your night sweats. They're not going to stop you feeling as awful as you feel, or your bones aching, or your teeth hurting, or your tinnitus, or your hair falling out, or your acne, all the stuff that the huge number of symptoms that could be related. It's a very, very complex area of medicine. Very little research, and nowhere near enough research has been done. The Dr. Lisa Mosconi book on the neurology of the menopause brain is so brilliant, and it explains how completely different the female brain is from a neurological blood flow point of view to the male brain. So all of that is now beginning to be done, and I think that's the key. At the moment, we don't have enough information, and only one person in Europe has been doing it, and now it's all beginning to be done, and I think that will be really helpful for women. So it's hard for women because it's complex medicine, and it's very individual in terms of prescription.
Very individual. So, Lorraine, can you give us the name of that book again?
It's Dr. Dr. Lisa Mosconi.
Lisa Mosconi.
Really brilliant and really helpful, and it will explain a lot of things to women, and every GP should read it, but you know they haven't, so
They haven't. Probably won't. I'm so sad, but what you're doing is incredible, really, really incredible. Thank you.
Yes.
And I just want to say to everybody, if you've got a specific question for Lorraine rather than HBD, if you type it in the little text box with a question at the bottom of your phone, then we can see it there. Because I've been listening to Lorraine and I haven't been keeping an eye out for questions at all.
I'm trying to look through, because I'm usually quite good at answering them as they go along, but it is, as I say, it is quite complex.
The documentary was the Panorama documentary, and Lorraine wrote a fabulous article because she was so incensed by the whole thing, and quite rightly. And the article, the headline was, "There's a scandal about HRT, but it's not the one Panorama thinks it is." And you can find it online, The Independent, and so many great comments on there as well.
Yes, yeah, and really. I think people, it was about a small number of women who had issues with a high dose of HRT. We don't know them anywhere near enough about their medical background, no. I didn't think, from the programme to know. And there wasn't a test base either. And I think Liz Earle has done a YouTube. She's a journalist, wellbeing journalist, who's been obviously writing. She's written over 30 books, and she's one of the first people to write a book about the menopause. She's done a sort of deep dive into why women don't need to be frightened on her YouTube following the documentary. And I think there's people sort of saying, there's a lady here who says that she was told that she was under 50 she couldn't have the menopause, but you know, that's literally, that's the GP not looking at the nice guidelines, which are all online for everybody to look at. So we're still living in that misinformation. We've just done a podcast with Dr. Juliet Balfour, who's an NHS GP who set up the Wells Menopause Clinic. She works with the campaign group Menopause Mandate, and that podcast was out the week before last, and that's got tons and tons of information. But as she does make the point, you know, we are still learning. There's some new drugs coming out next year which are going to help with hot flushes for those women who can't take hormone replacement therapy. Not everybody would need to, but it's worth knowing that HRT is a preventative medicine for osteoporosis and for heart disease. So it's not just for menopause and perimenopause. You know, we need that estrogen for other diseases as well.
Overall health. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Can I ask you one more question? It's a bit of a stupid question, really, but I mean, I am astonished by what you get done. You know, you have 4 children and a late onset humming husband, and a stellar career in journalism, and author of 2 best-selling books, plus your Postcards from Midlife, also chart-topping Postcards from Midlife podcast, and you're a cold water swimmer. I mean, how do you do it? Do you wake up in the morning thinking, right, you know, this is what I'm going to do today? I mean, how do you do it? And have you always been blessed with amazing energy? I'd love to know.
Well, when I was much younger, I do think I was probably irritatingly energetic. I think that was probably quite annoying for everybody. And, you know, I am an early riser. That's my chronological thing. I love to be up at 6 and I get stuff done. I am quite focused on an end goal. So I'll always have in my office and around me things that I want to happen, that I dream of happening, that I think might happen. So just having those notes always around, think, well, you know, I am working towards that, kind of makes you think, well, I won't get there unless I do actually go and do that swim. Or I won't get there unless I do read all those books, you know, for the podcast. And also I think if you're a journalist, news does, and I was a news journalist for a long time, train you to work quite fast and assimilate a huge ton of information and keep it in your brain, which is why the perimenopause threw me, because I just couldn't remember anything, and I was like, this is very unlike me. But I do have sort of down, lost, lonely days like everyone else. I just have this sense where I keep in my mind that, you know, if I want that, then I'm going to have to do this, and it's exactly the same thing. If I don't want to do it, I tend to do it very first thing, work-wise, something that I'm dreading, or I think I'll just get that done and out of the way. I have become much better at rest, and I would really urge women to, you know, it's not a competition how we all are or how we are. I have a huge support system around me. I have really close friends. I've got a really great husband. I love my kids. I've got a good family. So I've got this network, and I use it. I will ask for help, but also I will put rest in the diary. I will put, in the last sort of couple of years, I've started to do that, 2 days to rest. To a couple of hours in the afternoon to rest, because I might have been incredibly busy. There was a week where we had a live show with 3,000 people coming to it, and we recorded 5 podcasts, and then 2 days later I was doing the book launch, and then I was going on, and I didn't put rest in there, and obviously inevitably I got ill. So I know from that structure now that it wasn't good, it isn't good. And I know, looking back, a lot of the way that I worked was not, good for my well-being, and I should have been more mindful about taking those moments out to have some peace and rest. I found yoga. I say that sounds a very privileged thing to say, but about 5 years ago, I wrote a piece on how ridiculous yoga was, and it didn't work. And actually, in the researching of it, I found out that I was wrong, and it does work. It's really helpful. And I made a very close friend of my yoga teacher, and she has transformed my life. She's just given me my mental mind back. And it makes you a nicer person, I think, to put rest in your day and give yourself permission to do it. And I know that sounds like a very privileged thing to say, but we had Donna Lancaster on the show, who's written amazing. She comes from a very underprivileged background, and she was saying that even if you are working shifts and just 10 minutes of rest will make a difference. Just 5 minutes of rest will make a difference. But if you don't put it in, you're not caring for yourself. And if you don't put it in, your kids don't see you caring for yourself. So they don't think it's a good thing to care for themselves. So I think it's very it's not, we should be doing it more, and we should be role modeling it more in front of our children.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Lorraine. Really, I'd never thought about that, but that's a top tip.
It's a good one.
Thank you so much. Yeah, a really good one. And thank you so much for taking time out from hugging of your daughter.
Thank you for bearing with me.
No, thank you. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your wisdom and for doing all the amazing things you do. And everybody who's here, I will put up those links so that you can follow Lorraine and Trish and get Lorraine's books and find their podcast and their amazing Substack. I love that. It's so good.
Yes,
so thank you for
it's just a newsletter on the Substack. It's a new platform, but we try to put as much stuff as we can there that's helpful really for women as well, and things to buy and read and see and do, and that kind of thing as well. We just try to be as helpful as we can to women, because we both edit glossy magazines, and we're used to that lovely community around us, and we don't want to let those women who are reading Elle and Red and In Style America and Cosmo, the ones we edited, we don't want to let that group down. We want to always be there for them.
All growing and moving together. That's just fabulous.
Yeah.
No, bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You.
Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.